The yandere, perhaps the most infamous of anime character tropes despite going largely unused. 3 series dominate the conversation surrounding it: Future Diary, School Days, and Higurashi. So what is a yandere? There's no exact definition, but we can be guided by its etymology. Yandere is a portmanteau of the Japanese words for being sick and being love-struck. It refers broadly to characters whose initially sweet crushes turn destructive in nature, driving them to insanity and violence in the name of love. At least until Yuno Gasai arrived on the scene, Shion Sonozaki was pretty inarguably the most iconic iteration of this trope. I understand why people think Shion is a yandere. The Higurashi anime in particular never really disputes it, but even those who know the far more intricately written version of her character from the sound novels have openly endorsed this concept. In the process, they misunderstand the message of Shion's story. In this essay, I want to present a psychological profile of the most impeccably written character I've come across to date, and explain why Shion deserves all the love she gets, but gets it for all the wrong reasons. Miyakashi stands apart from the rest of Higurashi as an arc that focuses almost obsessively on a single character. We are trapped within Shion's mind for the entirety of its run, with one goal: to understand. When we talk about yandere, we need to talk about their origins. There is no definitive source on this, but it's speculated the trope evolved from the idea of the Yamato Nadeshiko. The Yamato Nadeshiko is the ideal Japanese woman. She exists to uphold the kind of hierarchy found exactly in families like the Sonozakis. She is wise, mature, elegantly beautiful and refined, yet hiding a powerful resilience befitting her prestige. Ultimately, however, the Yamato Nadeshiko exists to support the men around her, eternally inoffensive. The yandere then obtains this relationship through completely opposite means, perhaps intending to push back against the stifling image imposed through this ideal. In the process, these characters are instead often left bereft of any discernible personality beyond their obsession with their male character of choice. When we meet Shion, she's charismatic, clever, flirtatious, and funny. She's equally callous, manipulative, and quick to anger, depending on the situation. Much like her sister, all the clashing elements we cannot quite form into a complete picture. Ultimately, Shion is neither trope. She's human. Our immediate image of Shion once we reach her arc is one of fighting against the status quo. The private boarding school she has been confined to represents everything she hates, numbing of individual thought in the name of order and religion. The institution exists to teach young ladies from wealthy families how to exemplify their role in society, namely by knowing their place. Incidentally, if you're familiar with Umineko, this is the same school Enja attends and despises in equal measure. On her ride back to Okinomiya after her escape, we learn Shion is not openly accepted into the Sonozaki family in the first place, having been all but cast out as a child simply for being the unwanted younger twin. Shion uses humour as a coping mechanism often regarding this topic. In reality, the lack of a stable home has imbued in her an intense loneliness. The reason she returns time and time again to her memories of the dam protests are because they were the closest thing she ever experienced to a sense of belonging. Unable to achieve it again, she sets out to carve her own path against all she has been taught and is expected to follow. In her family's eyes, everything she does is already somehow wrong, so why try to be right? Shion stands at a crossroads in her life, on the brink of adulthood. Much of this arc is about her maturation, and how deteriorative it is. She already possesses a disconcerting lack of empathy to pair with her oft antisocial behaviour. She is very happy to use others for her own gain, with little consideration of how it will affect them. Then there's her propensity for reckless risk-taking. Put bluntly, Shion looks an awful lot like a little something called a psychopath. But these traits are not innate, they're learned. Moreover, it takes a keen eye to spot them, but there are a few key places where she falls short. Namely, anything to do with self-worth. Shion likes to affect overflowing confidence, even a superiority complex. But make no mistake, this is an act. Every so often, a blink and you'll miss it hint to her true feelings flashes by. In many ways, Miyakashi is an arc separated into 2 distinct halves. The first half highlights Shion's naivety. Whilst playing at being an adult, she is still frightened of things like canned food and Oyashiro-sama's curse. She struggles with changes that signify the passage of time, such as her favourite cake shop closing down during her time away from Okinomiya. She is disconcerted by the ways in which Mion has developed an identity distinct from hers, the signs of growth she has yet to obtain, and the threat of a growing distance between them. Still, at the start of the arc, in a scene nothing short of heartbreaking upon retrospection, she affirms their relationship and the fact that it will never change even as they do, another childish hope. The scene where Shion first meets Satoshi is extremely telling. She is utterly affection deprived. As this relationship develops, the cracks in her exterior become all the more evident, and she quickly becomes obsessed. She has no long-term goals, no truly solid relationships, few hobbies or commitments. Her days and weeks come to revolve around the time she can spend with him. When he rejects her during the incident at the school, she catastrophizes. Her life is over. After all, what other meaning or warmth is there to her existence besides this tenuous bond? These emotional outbursts beg another diagnosis: borderline personality disorder. Of all the psychiatric phenomena I'll talk about in this video, BPD may fit Shion best. It's a disorder characterized by fear of abandonment and intense, unstable relationships. That said, as someone who generally wants personality disorders scrapped from the DSM, saying Shion fits the BPD profile doesn't really say anything. Why does she possess these traits? Can she progress beyond them? And how? Shion and Satoshi's relationship is one of our greatest tools to understanding her. Shion doesn't just adore Satoshi, she strongly identifies with him, namely with the prejudice he experiences wherein people are unwilling to look beyond his name before they decide his worth as an individual. She longs to preserve in him the innocence she has largely lost, and to keep him from becoming tainted by the hatred of the world. At the same time, she envies Satoko deeply, not only for monopolizing Satoshi's attention generally, but for having an older sibling willing to shield her from abuse. She projects onto both the siblings simultaneously, explaining her strong emotions towards them. Watch closely and you'll see. When she talks about them, she is so often also talking about herself. We can see Shion is deeply affected by her family's treatment of her and how this has informed her sense of self-worth, or lack thereof. Children in her circumstances come to rationalize their neglect the only way they know how. They aren't loved because they don't deserve it. They never can quite obtain this love no matter their efforts, and come to believe they hold some inherent defect as a result. This mindset follows them into adulthood, hardwired into their psychology, and every rejection only further feeds it. It's no wonder Shion latches on to Satoshi for dear life the second he shows her unconditional kindness, even physical affection, foreign concepts. It's no wonder losing this feels like the end of the world. Naturally, she doesn't hesitate to stand up for him when he needs it most, the way nobody ever has for her. She doesn't even stop to think of the repercussions. Let's take a moment to consider the strangeness of Shion's family situation. Her father is the boss of the local Yakuza. From a young age, she knows exactly what this means. Her primary caretaker is Kasai, an intimidating bodyguard who will happily entertain macabre humour surrounding the content of his prior work. Then there's her mother's side of the family, the Sonozakis, carriers of demon blood who have maintained control over the entire region through a reign of fear characterized by torture and symbolic sacrifice. At the start of this arc, Shion briefly mentions that she thinks her mum will be on her side. She can't support her openly, of course, but she'll be sympathetic. She even jokes with Kasai about the torture they'll undergo together if she's caught. She is fully aware of her situation, yet doesn't truly comprehend it at all. She understands logically how strongly her family holds to concepts like honor, and that nobody is fully exempt from the possibility of punishment. Yet deep down, as anyone would, she hopes love will win out. She hopes that, as family, she is different. She spends her life pushing boundaries in an attempt to affirm this. It's important we understand just how traumatic this next event is, because to the last, Shion expects that someone, anyone, will stand up and protect her. In the end, she begs for Mion to see her pain, screams for her mother, and nobody comes. Let's forget fingernails for a moment. This is the true horror of this scene. It was made very clear to me how merciless people could be. This sentiment is repeated in multiple forms as Shion's worldview bends before our eyes. The idea that cruelty will eventually concede to kindness. Impossible. How had she thought that? And she learns. She lives in a world where people pay for their wrongdoings in blood. She was simply naive for not realizing sooner. The self that wants to retain this innocence, this belief in the good of people, and that which has been exposed to the harsh reality, battle it out within her henceforth. Shion is a ticking time bomb. For a year, the fuse smoulders steadily as she sleepwalks through life. When we consider just how long Shion works to stay sane in the face of everything she's been through, she becomes a far more admirable figure. In her complete submission to the delusion that Satoshi's ghost is following her everywhere she goes, and the relationship she develops with said spectre, her outbreak slowly progresses, brought on by depression, emptiness, and intense solitude, far more than the paranoia and anger we see in Keiichi and Rena. The latent trauma from Shion's torture only surfaces with the 5th iteration of the curse. Already just entering the Saiguden deeply disturbs her, reminding her family are still a threat. On a superficial level, seeing the torture devices likely revives memories and emotions she'd rather forget, finally waking her back up. But it's when she hears of Takano and Tomitake's deaths that she snaps. Not suddenly, but after a lifetime of what she sees as bought time. At the start, Shion is very much acting out of self-defense. People are dead. Her family have abused her horrifically in the past. It only follows then. Her psychotic symptoms and trauma are now working in overdrive, a cacophony of alarm bells warning her she's next. She is not the naive girl she once was, and she won't face the same fate as Satoshi. Think of Keiichi's intense persecution complex from the first arc, only now with a lot more basis in reality. We see how completely Shion has changed over the course of this year in one parallel. At the very beginning of this arc, we see her fiddling anxiously with the keys that will buy her escape from St. Lucia's, the threshold between her current life and the future she desires. Now she handles the keys that will take her beyond the point of no return with a cold resolve, hauling 2 bodies behind her. In the first scene, she chastises herself. Mion wouldn't hesitate in this situation. Here, she takes the time to insult her sister's idiotic conscientiousness for labelling the same set of keys that will now imprison her. Regarding Shion's behaviour moving forwards, we need to understand that her perception of violence is extremely dulled by her long-term exposure to it. We even see this in the otherwise docile Mion, utterly unfazed when she has to step in to cover for Keiichi and Rena in other arcs and literally bury bodies for them. Shion finds herself similarly unemotional, the shock of her entire situation only now setting in. She echoes lines she has been told to take back control, to find confidence, even as she is terrified. It's easy to forget the very first death that triggers the next series of events, Orio's, is entirely an accident. Shion does not embark on this revenge trip willingly, but now there's no turning back. Soon, anger overwhelms fear. The Sonozakis exclude her, literally banning her from entering Hinamizawa, then expect her to know all the ins and outs of its internal rule system? This is genuinely ridiculous. All her life, Shion has been punished for seemingly indiscriminate reasons, and now to the extent that it will cost her her life? No way. How dare they value a building over her? Worst of all, it makes her believe. A group of people this callous, with rules this far beyond the comprehension of the average person, could do it. They killed Satoshi. This is not just Shion's delusion, but the entire village's. Kimiyoshi and Mion both affirm her belief that the Sonozakis are responsible. The Sonozakis are above the law and rule the entirety of Hinamizawa. Unlike someone like Mion who has fought to develop her own set of morals amidst this, or someone like Keiichi who grows up completely apart from it all and is understandably disturbed when he comes to learn the archaic ways of this small community, Shion has spent her life torn between 2 worlds. She is nothing more than a child, still trying to learn right from wrong, placed within a deeply twisted situation, full of desperation and with nobody to turn to. Of course, Shion knows murder is wrong. That's the problem. The assumed murder of Satoshi is the fixed beginning of this chain of events, set in motion by her family, not her. Still, her moral development stalls around the understanding of why murder is wrong. Not because one must never deprive another of their life, the Sonozakis take no issue with this, but because they must have a sufficient reason to do so. There are two things Shion has always been taught: that you can very neatly separate the world into allies and enemies, and that any cruelty is allowed if someone falls into the latter category. An eye for an eye. Anyone who she deems responsible both knows and deserves what's coming to them. It is only in the final act that the underlying melancholy that has characterized the entire arc takes tonal precedence. Shion envies Satoko for being stronger than her, she envies Rika for being able to protect her the way she couldn't protect Satoshi, and of course feels the same way about Mion. After all, her sister would surely have protected Keiichi under the same circumstances. She feels unbearably small, powerless, and alone. A lifelong inferiority complex finally takes over. Shion welcomes the brief vitriol Keiichi shows her. She tells him, a human and a demon aren't compatible. If she had ever been deserving of love, she is far beyond that now. Rena and Keiichi's enduring compassion towards her shocks her to her core. Of course, this compassion by and large belongs to Mion, but she watches as Rena assesses her actions without consideration of her identity and still shows her some measure of mercy. Comparatively, while she has some affection for Keiichi, she knows it is one-sided. He simply thinks she is his best friend. She is disappointed not only that he cannot see through her disguise, but that he does Mion the same disservice. This arc is the birth of the idea that will come to characterize all of Umineko. Without love, it cannot be seen. She wants not only to be recognized and judged as herself, but for people to be able to distinguish the both of them. Only then can they find independent happiness. Still, her conversation with him, where she bears all her sins and is embraced, allows a weight to lift. Through Keiichi and Rena, she finally learns true, unconditional love. All too late. Shion is not a willing antagonist, but one who felt she had to grow into a role she had already been assigned. A self-fulfilling prophecy. She is someone who, like so many, tried to understand the cruelty she was shown by seeing herself as inherently bad. For all the violence of the arc, her actions are not centered around hurting others, but desecrating her own self, and ruining any opportunity for redemption. She can never be good, so she will become the worst she can be instead. She longs for a world where she simply had the opportunity to experience the mundane, everyday happiness of a life with friends who loved her. Instead, she believes she is responsible for everyone's unhappiness. One ultimate fate awaits her. The only duty she ever possessed as Shion of the Sonozaki family, to remove herself, the element of discord in a world where her happiness simply isn't a part of the equation, one that will surely be better off without her. Higurashi is a story about humans learning not to push their sins onto others. Shion, then, is its ultimate tragedy. In the final tip in this arc, Shion's torture is recontextualized as something of a rite of passage. However undeniably messed up this is, the point is Akane and Oryo both went through it too, Shion only being the next link in the chain of suffering, the one who finally snapped under the pressure. Not inherently bad, only the product of a bad world. Mion and Shion are complete foils of one another. Like sun and ice, as Shion puts it. We see flashes of Mion's upbringing come through sometimes too. Seemingly dissonant yet shocking moments, such as when she slaps Rena. Even murder is not beyond Mion's capabilities under the right circumstances, and yet she attempts constantly to atone through an outpouring of compassion, equally willing to rip off her nails or take a bullet for her friends. We see this as a strength, but in a series like Higurashi that deals with humans rather than heroes, it's only another way in which her upbringing has taken from her the opportunity to be a regular teenager. It's also why she values this identity so resolutely. Occasionally, Shion remarks that her sister is more mature than her. Mion has accepted the reality of her unconventional situation and is willing to take any criticism for her actions on the chin. She has made her commitment to her role, whatever the cost. Shion describes Mion as someone who believes the world is all ones and zeros. If Yakuza sort people into friends and foes, Mion does everything to put people in the former category. She goes against everything she has been reared to become, in treating violence as a last resort. Mion is self-sacrificial to a fault. She'd shoulder all the hardship in the world if she could. When Shion calls her sister stupid, she means it as a virtue. Stupid as in willing to believe people are good despite all the evidence towards the contrary. Stupid as in able to remain kind whilst bred in an environment dictated by cruelty. Stupid as in pure, somehow still untainted. Shion's self-hatred is spurred by her sister more than anyone. As a child, she thinks she's doing her a service, lending Mion her identity. She's the special one, but she'll let her taste that prestige for a day at a time. How shocking it must have been, then, to have that ripped from her on the day Mion was accidentally brandished the successor. There is nothing truly special about her, nothing besides her name, now entrusted to another. Even as their parents fail to distinguish between them, Shion is suddenly the bad one, the unwanted one. In every comparison she makes between herself and Mion, the seeming coldness is only shame. The longer Shion spends pretending to be her sister, the more she starts to question whether she really deserved that name in the first place. And who is she then, really? With Mion already there, this arc is Shion's battle to craft her own identity. Shion never becomes perfect. In Minagoroshi, we watch her threaten to beat Keiichi with a chair. The point is that she does this as he stands between her and Satoko. Through simply being accepted into a family far stronger than the one she was given by blood, she also finds purpose. She transforms from Satoko's persecutor into her protector. Satoko faced the pain of Satoshi's disappearance and grew from it. She searched her soul for lessons she could learn from the situation and vowed to welcome her brother back, a better sister and a stronger person, someone she could be proud of. Through it all, she asked for recognition from nobody. Shion realizes through Satoko that she had taken the easy way out, and vows to learn from her. She never looks back. In Matsuribayashi, Shion states her willingness to sacrifice herself for Mion at the very site she had once murdered her. Even more strikingly, she tells Keiichi Mion loves him. She simply wants her to be happy, and no longer sees this as a commodity only one of them can ever be afforded. Most powerfully of all, she asks him to pass on one simple message. She hopes they can be twins again in the next life. She'd do it all again. Shion is not a yandere. At the very end, in a fantastic monologue, she lays it all out for us. Her actions have nothing to do with Satoshi. Of course they don't. Never once had she truly believed killing others is what he would have wanted. She willfully uses him as an excuse. The typical yandere does everything for the boy she obsesses over. Shion is thinking about anything but. She strongly denies the belief Satoshi will ever return. This is for her. At the same time, this is not only a story of first love, but of all the cruelest and most painful parts of growing up. As dark as this arc goes, its message that our guardians are not infallible beings, but humans who, at worst, may not love us and support us in the ways we'd hope, is all too commonly felt. And while I hope it goes without saying that I don't support Shion's actions, there's something satisfying in seeing a girl expected to suffer in silence rightfully condemn a world that has wronged her. Higurashi gives us many variants on this story, and while some of its characters are easier to sympathise with than others, all are equally important, and equally deserving of happiness. Still, Shion leads the answer arcs because she spearheads Higurashi's march forwards. She learns from her mistakes and never makes them again. Most of all, she dares to heal. She recontextualizes her love for Satoshi as a driving force for positive growth. This love in itself, however unhealthy it could get, is never framed by Ryukishi as a negative thing. As it so often does, Higurashi defies convention. Satoshi could have been erased from the narrative entirely, made a plot device. Instead, Shion lives with that ache and becomes stronger for it. Even so, in the end, most antithetical of all to the trope she deconstructs, she proves she doesn't need him to be happy. In Shion Sonozaki, Ryukishi wrote a woman who was so easy to hate and made us love her. That alone makes her an incredibly powerful figure. More than anything, Shion is a character who is faced with a life full of struggle and the choice to let it take her under or to rise to the challenge. I don't want people to brand her a yandere because it falsely puts the burden of her development on a male character, but I also don't want that because it furthers her legacy as a tragic figure, rather than as one who symbolises triumph over circumstance. Shion's story is a powerful ode to second chances, forgiveness, compassion, and self-growth. It's long overdue that we move on like she did and remember her not for who she was, but for everything she became.